Hey everyone, welcome back. In the last video, we learned how a player can enter arrow sequences using arrow keys on the keyboard. In this video, we will learn how to check if the player entered the right sequence or not. Let me share my screen. This is what we have done till now. To check the arrow sequence is matching or not, we need to store what was generated by the computer. Okay, we will use variables for this purpose. What is a variable? It is nothing but a container to store data. In Scratch, in a variable, we can either store a name or number. So let's create 4 variables and name them first arrow, second arrow, third arrow, and fourth arrow. As the name suggests, we will store the arrow sequences, the arrow sequence generated by the computer in these variables. Okay, fourth arrow. So we will transfer this is a random number generated by the computer from 1 to 4, which we store in arrow number to check what to broadcast, and then we will shift the content of this variable arrow number to first arrow when we are in this repeat loop for the first time, to the second arrow and we are inside the repeat loop for the second time. But how to know if we are in the repeat loop for the first time or second time or third time, fourth time? We will use a variable called counter. Okay, and we will name it counter for imposter. Okay, so before we enter the repeat loop, we will set this counter as 0. Okay, and when it enters the repeat loop, we will change the counter for imposter by 1. Okay, now for the first time, when it enters, it was 0 and it changes to 1. When the loop repeats second time, it changes by 1. So from 1 to 2. Again it repeats third time, it changes by 1 from 2 to 3, and so on. Okay, now we will use this counter to check if we are inside the repeat loop for the first time, second time, or third time. Okay, so we will check if counter is equal to 1. So if the counter is 1, we need to transfer the content of this variable arrow number to first arrow. Okay, I will just right click and duplicate it. If we are inside the inside the repeat loop for the second time, that is counter is 2, then we need to shift it to second arrow. It's the value of second arrow. Okay, and if we are inside this repeat loop for the third time, that means we need to transfer the content of this variable to the third arrow, and finally fourth time we will save the content of this arrow number to the fourth arrow. Okay, so computer generated the sequence every time it repeated inside the loop, and that sequence was shifted to arrow number, and then we send the right broadcast message, and then we checked which like if we are inside the repeat loop for the first time, then we shifted the arrow number to first arrow, and so on. Okay, now we will code for the BF. This boyfriend sprite. This is boyfriend's turn, and boyfriend computer waits till a player enters a key. Okay, till the player enters a key, and we check which key was pressed. So in the same, we will create a variable called player key to store what the player pressed. Okay, which key player pressed. We will set it to, if the player pressed left arrow key, we will set player key variable to 1. Okay, I'll change it here. And if player pressed down arrow key, we will set it to 2. If the player pressed down arrow key, up arrow key, we will set it to 3. And if the player pressed right arrow key, we will set it to 4. Okay, Now we need to check this value inside this player key with the values inside these arrow keys and variables, first, second, third, fourth. But again, we need to use a counter, okay? Because we are inside the variable repeat loop for the first time, then we need to check this player key against first arrow, if it matches the first arrow or not. If we are inside this repeat loop second time, then we need to match with second arrow, this player key variable with the second arrow. Okay, so we need a counter here as well. We'll use counter for BF. Again, we will set it to 0 before we enter the repeat loop, and as soon as we enter the repeat loop, we will change the value by 1. Just like imposter, we are using counter here for boyfriend sprite. Now we need to check if we are inside the repeat loop for the first time, second time, third time. We will use if loop if counter is equal to counter for BF is equal to 1. So that means we are inside it for the first time. Then we need to check if this key, this player key variable contains the same number as that contained in the first arrow key. Okay. If it is the same, then the game should go on, simply go on. We don't need to do anything else. But if it is not equal, so there's a mismatch, that means not equal, then we need to stop the game. We will send a broadcast message called, let's call it BF dead, and the game is over. Dead. And then stop the game using stop all block. Okay. Similarly, we will just duplicate this, and if we are inside this repeat loop for the second time, then we need to match the key pressed by the player against the second arrow, value of second arrow. If not equal, then again broadcast boyfriend dead. Similarly, for the third time, we will check, and with the third arrow key, what the player pressed against third arrow. And similarly, for the last fourth time, we will check player key with the fourth arrow. Okay, if doesn't match, then again broadcast dead. But we have not defined what happens when we receive broadcast BF dead. So over here we will define it, BF dead. We will change the boyfriend's costume to boyfriend dead and play a sound boyfriend dead. Okay, that's all coding which we needed here. I will hide these keys and shift them down. Let's play the game and see if it is working properly or not. 1-1. Wrong. Okay, let's enter the right key. 2 is down, left, right, right. So it is working perfectly. This game is working nicely. That's all for today, for this video. But you can also think of modification in this game. We can create multi-level game. Okay, we can increase the arrow speeds or increase the length of these arrows, like from 4 to 5 or 6, 7, to make the game more difficult. Okay, but to do so, you will need to make changes in the code. Instead of repeating only 4 times, maybe you have to repeat 5-6 times and then use more variables. But this is not a very good method and smooth method. Much easier and smoother ways to use something called lists. I want you to try this out and try this creating a multi-level game, okay, using lists, and let let me know how it goes. Hope you enjoyed the videos and learned something new. Bye bye.